You've reached Hotel Pacifico, your 5-star destination for BC politicos. Press 4 for room service. Press the star key for your hosts Mike McDonald and Kate Hammer.
Welcome back, guests. Thanks for joining us again for early check-in at Hotel Pacifico. Good to see you, Geoff and Mike.
Good to see you. We just had an earthquake, eh?
I know.
Not only that, we have a celebrity visitor.
I know. We've got a special guest checking in from out of town today. Welcome, David Herle.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me on. Look at that.
Oh, you got to listen to it.
It's on the show today.
You hear that? So David Herle's on the show today. Maybe
Okay.
he's speaking in his low voice today, the cactus.
He's decaffeinated. We need to help him out.
But I had feedback last night from two people that they wanted more cactus. So
Cactus is popular.
oh, there you go.
Yeah,
you got your cactus, David.
Thank you very much. I feel honored.
All right. Welcome to BC, David. You've got early morning earthquakes, a dusty 20th century political brand making an unprecedented comeback, a team of political orphans running as independents, bug-eating conspiracies, and a charismatic parrot named Biardi. And the Ritz have only just dropped. Why don't you pull up one of Hotel Pacifico's famously comfy leather wingback chairs and help us unpack it all? What does it look like from afar watching all of this drama play out on the West Coast?
It is quite dramatic, I have to say. And I mean, you're in the day-to-day of it, but just watching it from a distance, it seems like the Conservatives have so much momentum. The question is, has it crested, or when does it crest? So it's been a fascinating ride you've been on, and so far it seems it seems like we're headed for a result possibly that seemed inconceivable a year ago.
Yeah.
Which for our people in other parts of the country is an interesting thought as well.
Yeah, and some interesting dynamics that might have implications, I think, for other provinces and sort of changing dynamics and currents within politics in Canada.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're going to stick around for us today. So glad to have you for the episode, and I'm excited for us all to get to the espresso bar later. But we'll start with our check-in. We've got the leaders today: David Eby in Chilliwack, Sonia Furstenau is in Creston making a mental health announcement, John Rustad in Vanderhoof for a rally, and Prince George for a campaign kickoff. He's been staying pretty close to home a bit lately. Let's check in then too about what we're expecting or what we saw yesterday. I think yesterday was a bit more like we saw locking horns on Tuesday, and then Wednesday really was a lot of like back and forth. And I'll start with the NDP unveiling their home ownership plan, which I think is really a contrast, something really different from what the Conservatives offered with the Rustad rebate. Any sense, like it's early days yet, but is there any sense that one of these or the other punch through more? Who's winning the conversation on housing right now?
Well, I think the NDP feel like they've got an advantage on housing, and they've talked a lot about it over the last year and a half. They've lots of legislation. There's certainly lots of concern about how they've brought the agenda in, and if you listen to planners and municipalities, they warn of lots of unintended consequences of the blunt hammer of the provincial government. However, from a public perspective, I think they see that these things they're trying to do things right. The 60-40 thing or whatever they're calling it, where the government's will take a 40% mortgage on people's property at 1.5% interest rates, an innovative idea. I saw some complaints last night from the Conservatives that, the government will take the upside, but they're not taking the downside of that investment. So it'll be interesting to see how the details come out in the coming days. But, as I said yesterday, we haven't heard much about the Rustad rebate since they unveiled that one. And now we'll see how consistent the NDP are talking about their plan.
Well, I think now that Rustad's announced the rebate, he has to go back and design it. I haven't heard anybody yet who...
Well, how many pages of
what it is?
Well, how much backgrounder was there on the NDP thing?
Well, there's been quite a bit because it builds on the Heather Lands announcement last week with Indigenous land.
They also have like
a
500 employees in government working on it too, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know. That's incumbency, Mike. You've been there. I think
exactly.
That there's been a lot of work done by EB on this thing, and I just want to make a tone comment, which is that I think David Eby's looking a lot more comfortable and at ease and feeling good about the campaign approach. He just looks comfortable and seems to be having a bit more fun. So I watch him pretty closely, and he looks like he's in a good groove here. Whereas I couldn't tell. In fact, I don't know if there was a Conservative campaign yesterday, except a damp squib of a so-called opposition research thing that fell flat. So we are, for David's benefit, repealing the laws of politics right now. I mean, it's just crazy what you see going on. We're getting to the polling in a minute, but I think the housing thing will penetrate because it sounds like something that would work for someone. If I'm hoping to get a home, I'm thinking, okay, wow, if I could get one at 60% off, I'll have a job for a while, I'll earn money, and then I have a way of getting out of it later without killing myself. That's good news. And he's talking about 25,000 units, and there's some reasonable people saying, yeah, that makes sense, and it happens elsewhere. So I think that the housing thing is going okay. But as we said at the top, maybe nothing matters anymore about this stuff.
You make an important point, though, Geoff, and I would completely agree with. There was, I think, a little bit of bit more spring in the step of David Eby yesterday. And the moment I think I really saw it was when before leading into this housing announcement, there was this moment where he just made a joke about the bugs, right? Like this joke about in my experience, you have to prevent kids from eating bugs. And it's like, it's perfect, right? It's him at ease. It's his brand. It's the dad vibe. Like he felt like he was in his stride.
But
on
to
the
be
flip,
fair, none of us believe our kids should have to eat bugs. I think that's a very broad unifying statement, right?
well, yes. I mean, but I mean, again, like let's talk a little bit too about how much these things do or don't have legs, because I think this is what's interesting. Like for the BC Conservatives not to be back on this rebate and reiterating that and coming back to it, and instead the thing that has the legs, too many legs maybe, is the bugs. Um, like I think it wasn't quite the day the Conservatives needed, and I think they gave some of that space to David Eby. I mean, we can talk a bit though. Like, let's pivot to Robbie Callan. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say, the
Yeah.
Conservative move yesterday was to launch an attack on the NDP, which Geoff, you were alluding to, and they went after Robbie Callan and his, relationship with a lobbying firm that is his sister, I think,
Includes his sister.
It's a
But
sister.
it
Yeah.
fell
She's
apart on the launch pad. And even the headline on the Tory website, which I just looked at, says it was a potential conflict of interest. Well, there was none at all. It was refuted almost immediately, and they had nothing else yesterday.
Well, refuted by the NDP, but
Well,
Right. Because we haven't heard.
The attacker was the redoubtable Eleanor Sturko, who said, well, there's a perception there. We have to raise it. There's potential. Like, that's
Geoff,
not a body blow.
That the NDP have launched lots of attacks about potential conflicts of interest in the past. So that's just what oppositions do, right? They've got a little bit of a circumstantial case, and they're going to run with it.
Can I get an
Anyways,
outsider?
they forced the NDP to have to deal with it for a couple hours. So that's what you do in a campaign, is try to.
I'm curious what David thinks of this
the
on
war
the
room's
surface
busy.
of it. I'm curious what David thinks of this on the surface of it, right? Because I think this is such a BC thing, David. I have to say, my own experience coming here, you're like, oh, who's married to who? And it's, on the surface of it, do you think there's something more here? And in particular, I'm wondering if the registrar, the lobbyist registrar, were to say, we're gonna look into this. Would that be damning? How might that play out?
Well, I mean, I guess if the lobby registrar got into it, it probably gives it a bit more legs. But I'm not really sure how much the election is going to turn on any of these kind of things. And I think that the real question is, what can the NDP do to change the dynamic that has created this surge for the Conservatives? I mean, it feels to me like it's not going to be. I mean, the Conservatives are going to run an undisciplined campaign. They're a new party. They got a bunch of new candidates. Their leader and team are untested. They're going to run an undisciplined campaign, and there's going to be opportunities for the NDP to do precisely what you're talking about, the Conservatives doing to them, which is to find ways to I think the Conservatives are going to be far more susceptible to that than the NDP are. So to me, these kinds of war room attacks and war room efforts are, if I was the Conservatives, that's what I would be worried about.
Well, so, I think there's signs that they've got a treasure trove, the NDP, of clips. And I was listening, and sort of just funny things, I'm going to say, like funny things, John Rustad saying oddball things. And I'm wondering, like, can you just keep hammering that? Or at some point, does it just become a bit tired and unsurprising? Like it's almost so outlandish, some of the variety of what he's saying, that at some point did the voters just tune out and go like, yeah, but he's better on the economy.
Well, there
Well,
might
I
be
think
some clues in the numbers. Maybe we should take a look at those. Mike was going to bring them forward. 2 polls yesterday with a lot of
well,
interesting stuff. in them.
you're scooping me, Jeff. You're scooping me.
No, I'm just moving us along because I think there's some very
Yeah.
interesting data there,
Yes.
and you're the data guy, man. Come on.
Well, yeah.
Guess I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest you may have a friend or family member who recently got their real estate license, as Vancouver, any part of Vancouver, remains Canada's leading source of multi-million-dollar teardowns. And sure, Toronto's rental vacancy rates are low, but guess whose are lower? In the latest 2021 census, over 100,000 residents claimed they were spending over 50% of their income on rent and utilities. As the presenting sponsor and hometown team for British Columbians, TELUS is stepping up to become a part of the solution by launching TELUS Living, an initiative to build purpose-built rentals in communities across BC. As BC's largest private employer and an essential services provider, TELUS recognizes the importance of being able to hire and retain workers who live and work locally. With that in mind, TELUS Living aims to create purpose-built housing options that offer a pure fiber-connected smart living experience that working middle-class people can afford. These housing options are designed to fit the unique needs of each community, providing a mix of unit sizes and amenities that cater to diverse population groups such as students, essential workers, and young professionals. And these units will be located in highly desirable areas because they will be built on the site of TELUS's central offices, buildings that provide the power necessary to deliver an internet or phone connection over copper wiring. You probably have one in your own community. Because of TELUS's leadership in fiber deployment, the central offices are no longer required because fiber uses much less power than copper. This means that the land can be repurposed to help with the housing affordability crisis in the communities where TELUS customers live and work. The copper can be repurposed too, but we'll tell you about that, as well as where this housing is being built next week. Okay, we'll give
Move us along, Kate.
I'll move us along. Well, I think, okay, so we'll say, I just wanted to, just looking at one thing we can come back to maybe tomorrow, say the Greens doubled down on the carbon tax, which kind of is the cheese stands alone, the Greens stand alone on carbon tax, committing to continue to increase it by $15 per year, but also increase rebates. I don't know that got too much attention, but we may come back to it, I think, and I'm certain the Greens will. Okay, so then let's do this. Let's move on to milking the data, brought to you by BC Dairy. Farmers need guaranteed access to water to feed BC. Mike, I know you're stoked to talk to us about these 2 polls we have out and some of the data underneath and what it's pointing to about like whether the NDP, as David points out, are making progress on sort of pinning John Rustad as weird.
Jeff, what do you call a cow in an earthquake?
A movement.
A milkshake. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a good answer though, Jeff.
Every day there will be a corny cow joke as part of the segment brought to you by BC Dairy.
Cow jokes every
Till
day.
the sponsor asks us to stop.
They might be here for it. Cow jokes.
Who knows? The
Yeah.
more we're talking about cows, I'm sure they're happy. Look, yesterday there were two polls released. One from Leger, one from Angus Reid. Obviously, they'll be probably on a weekly basis throughout the writ. I'm sure Main Street's out there blah, 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 doing their thing too. But I'll just focus on these 2. Despite all this conservative, foo-for-ah that we were talking about with regard to bugs and other issues, the voters so far seem to be, of a mind to make this a very tight race.
Not despite, right? Because these data predate the bugs.
Well, it's
vaccine.
yeah. I mean, Angus was in the field September 20th to 22nd. Leger was in the 20th to 23rd. So it's up until
It's like
Monday.
Yeah.
So we didn't quite see the impact of the vaccine issue with these numbers, but you know, in the first weekend of the campaign, you've got Angus at 45 NDP, Conservative 44, Greens 10, and Leger 45 Conservative, 43 NDP, Greens 10. So, yeah, like unproven brand, untested, all that stuff. Yet, you know, I think underpinning that is a pretty robust time for a change sentiment that's there. And, you know, it just I'm kind of in the same place I was a week ago. It's just like, what's going to happen in the first 10 days of the campaign? Voters are going to take a look at the Conservatives. And I think a lot of them are ready for change, but they're just not sure yet what kind of change that looks like.
So how many are undecided, Mike? And is it a bigger or lower number than you would expect at this point?
I don't have that number in front of me, Jeff, but it didn't strike me as anything.
Outlandish.
You know what?
See-
You know what undecided is in a poll? It's people who don't vote. You know
Hmm.
that's. I
Well,
don't know,
this is-
David. What do you think about that? I mean,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
how many?
undecided. Yeah.
who's available left to win over in this thing?
Well, I think people are floating around a bit, but
There's
Right.
always a cohort of people that decide at the very end. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you're largely right, Mike, that most of the people that are undecided will not vote. But you know, there's some. I mean, it's a real question in this election campaign because the change option is so uncertain. The change option is so unknown that I can see it's plausible to me that people are torn between their desire to have look at that.
I know.
Are torn between their desire to have political change and their concern about whether or not the Conservatives actually have the competence and the personnel to govern.
So it's like an extreme version of a change election. It's like, right? Like you can't change for the quantity, you know, you've got to change for the kind of a wild card, right? And that's a higher appetite. Yeah. That's almost like a pitchforks at the gate kind of appetite. Okay, editorializing there. But Mike, one of the things I think, and I wanted to pick your brain about this because I did think I saw in the data a bit of a regional background that really had that strength for the NDP in Vancouver bleeding into Burnaby, but seeming to evaporate pretty quickly as you move east.
Well, as I covered yesterday, last election, the NDP won the Lower Mainland by about 16 or 17 points. And this election is a lot closer in the Lower Mainland. So there's a lot of Lower Mainland seats are going to become competitive, and much the way they were prior to 2020 and 2017, 2013, so on. So, you know, I think out in the suburbs, you know, it's a real battleground. The question is, where's the line going to be drawn? You know, because you cross a certain line and all of a sudden 5 or 6 seats come in, you know, and that'll be the difference between winning and losing. And the other thing I've seen too
Hey,
is
Mike,
like,
how do you poll accurately? How do you poll accurately in BC in English?
yeah, well, you know, Chinese community, 20% of Lower Mainland is Chinese. I believe the Conservatives have an advantage in the Chinese community, and they're probably underrepresented in these polls. South Asian community, I don't know what's going on in the South Asian community, but they're probably 10% of Lower Mainland, you know, so yeah, it's a big factor. And the other thing, I mean, each methodology has their own quirks, you know, online and IVR. So, you know, you gotta, you know, nothing's perfect when it comes to polling.
Yeah.
My observations, which may not be that sound because I haven't got your experience, but is that EB has not seen his vote drop off. He's gained slightly as a result of BCU disappearing. He's not dropping off. He means maintaining his popularity, although the Conservatives are making some dents on it for sure. The Greens actually had lost some support. I think if they've lost some, it's more to the Conservatives than it is to the NDP. So that's why I raised the question, which I think David was pointing at. Who's left to win over in the argument here? Or is it strictly kind of a ground battle? You know, I just looked at yesterday with, honestly, I looked hard up and down. I thought I must have missed something. Where was Rustad? Well, he was in the Vanderhoof. He didn't say anything. They did the little oppo piece, which we've talked about. But that's basically a day off. I don't think Rustad's had a good first week, you know, so, and EB's feeling better. But we'll see, I think, in about a week, whether that's leading to any deterioration of the Conservative support. And
Well,
it's
you know,
really an
Jeff,
open question.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but But I feel like what's dangerous for the NDP is that I don't think this election's really in their hands. I think it's in the Conservatives' hands. I think the Conservatives have this opportunity that they potentially are getting in the way of, which is there's time for a change sentiment. And if voters felt like the Conservatives were responsible enough to get the keys to the car, I think it probably might well happen.
Mhm.
But
No
Well,
room for complacency.
well, and I
But
think
that's why you guys EB's not going to win this election with a better housing policy,
yeah,
right? He's going to win this election if Rustad's unacceptable.
Mhm.
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 That's the deal.
And then,
Yeah.
and then to that point, so we've got 51% think Rustad is too extreme. You want to overlay that with, so we've got, NDP support at 44%, 51% think Rustad's too extreme. Like there's room there, and people who are not feeling strongly compelled
but
by
I still
Rustad.
don't think there's a lot to be written in the story about Rustad. Voters don't really know much about him, and he's going to have a little bit more time left to try to fill in the blanks. He's going to have the debate, which is a little later in the campaign, which I don't think we've mentioned yet, but it's October 8th.
October 8th, yeah.
Is the TV debate, which, that's only 11 days before election day. I mean, if he had a great debate and got a big roll out of that, which has happened before, maybe, but it's no, I think this is
And if he
campaign
ends
is
up defending polio,
Yeah. Well,
right?
like, and it's going to be, so the only person, who's going to be up on that stage again is Sonia Furstenau. David Eby and John Rustad will both be up there for the first time. I don't know, um, like, I think for John Rustad, the challenge is going to be the NDP are going to have all this sort of like, he's weird, this stuff to throw at him. What's the imperative for him in that debate, Mike, in order to like establish himself and his brand? Because right now, I don't see them doing like, I mean, okay, there's the video with his wife that came out earlier. Like, what else are they doing to just kind of articulate?
well, I think John Rustad needs to first of all, he has a kind of a calm, methodical way of speaking. Like I think he can convey that he's a knowledgeable guy, who's a serious guy, who's got knows a lot about a lot of issues. But I think he has to reassure people. I think he has to reassure voters that they're going to run a government that's not going to be, kooky, and it's can go and fix the problems that people are concerned about. And right now, I that's reassurance is the word I'm kind of gravitating towards. And I don't feel, I think the NDP have done a good job, at least in the Twitter bubble and, the media filter in the last few days about undermining that.
So, okay, let's move on to the top.
And just to finish that thought, I am still not sure to what extent voters care about all that. Like that's a big question mark for me is like, I feel they need to reassure the voters, but I mean, these numbers in the polls seem to indicate that, well, almost, it's a dead heat, notwithstanding all the, quirks.
Yeah.
Now, we'll see what the trend looks like.
Well, it's interesting to me, and I'm curious, David, if you have any kind of compare and contrast from other provinces, but like, I've seen elections, provincial elections in particular, where people are a bit ho-hum because it feels like a foregone conclusion and engagement is low. This one could not be more colorful. And there could not be more of a contrast on the table. And yet we really are seeing that I was saying, I think earlier this week, there was one of the reporters was tweeting out how an elected had said, like, about more than half of people at the doors don't even realize it's an election. And then she had one person assure her he's totally voting for Kamala, right? Like, that's where we're at. And like, what's going on? Like, are we not entertaining enough? Like,
People don't, this will come as a surprise to the mutants who are listening to this program, but people don't like politics.
Except the people that are listening to this podcast.
Exactly.
The normies don't like it.
Mutants.
You mutants, welcome. Yeah.
Mutants at the Hotel Pacifico.
But I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Like, I think the next polls that come out, just to see if we get some of these attack ads, like registering with folks, and then as we move into the debate closer to October 8th, I think, maybe we'll see, when people are paying attention, we'll start to see things shift a lot. And I think this is my question, because I think, our last kind of the topic of the day, our last segment, I want to ask, like, can we just do a bit of a go round of advice for what what the NDP and the Conservatives in particular need to be doing in the, at this stage as we sort of set the tone in the for the campaign. So I'll start with you, Geoff, and you can pick one if you want to do one or the other. But what's your advice? What's the imperative?
Well, I like the way David Eby's personality is starting to reveal itself in the campaign, but I'm a broken record on this point, so I'll keep playing this tune. He has a really diverse, super strong front bench, and I think that's a strong reassurance to people out there. He could set a new changed tone by talking more about some of those people who are already quite experienced, but quite new to a lot of the voters. And that's one where I think, Rustad would struggle. He's got some people from BC United who have been around for a long time, but are not, with all due respect to them, obvious front bench material. Some were in the last government, last time they were in government, but not for a while. That would be the one thing I would say. But I think they're on a good, the first week so far has been going pretty well. And I would try to stay on that course and make sure that people feel that Eby continues to be the stronger candidate to lead the province in what is a really troubled time.
All right. Mike, what's your advice?
Well, I think with the NDP, I think they're probably on the track they need to be on in terms of just going around showing EB with lots of campaign supporters, being positive, talking about the issues that they have a strategic advantage on, probably housing and launching the attacks on the Conservatives. And, frankly, the Conservatives can see this plan coming from a mile away. So, as I said earlier, it really comes down to, the Conservatives, what kind of campaign are they going to run here? And I do think it's been a bit sleepy in the first few days. I do think they have the ability to get people out to momentum style events. If they design it that way, there's going to be one in Prince George tonight, but that's Prince George, and I frankly, next week, I think Rustad should be parked in the suburbs of Vancouver, much like John Horgan was in 2017. And he should go around and talk to people about their problems on affordability, crime, and healthcare, and talk about all the terrible things that are happening in the province from their perspective, right? And how they're going to have a plan to fix it and connect it to the voters that are attainable to them. But right now, I don't know what they have in store, but that's what I'd be thinking.
Great. David.
Well, I presume that nobody in BC knows anything about this party or this leader, despite the fact that he's got a history in BC politics and has been a cabinet minister. Pierre Poilievre has put them in this position, not anything that they have done. And so I presume that they have nominated a dog's breakfast of candidates. And so while Rustad himself may be a knowledgeable, soft-spoken, authoritative-sounding person, there must be a treasure trove of reasons not to elect them in that caucus. And if I was both parties, that's where I would be focusing. If I was the Conservatives, I would be ruthlessly, at this stage, ahead where they are, I would be ruthlessly vetting my own candidates and getting rid of the ones I need to before the deadline. And
The deadline's fast approaching too.
right. And if I was the NDP, I would be spending all of my paid media. You're right. Have EB out there doing the nice stuff on the earned, and nobody will care. But it's just a nice contrast. But my paid media would be deconstructing the Conservatives as an option.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Just on that, where they come at the Conservatives on picking them apart on candidates and these issues, the Conservatives have to find a way to elevate the conversation back to, crime on the streets, too expensive to live, $10 billion deficit, et cetera, and use that as a shield against all the distracting stuff. And that's hard to do, but that's where their opportunity is.
I think that's the risk, right? Like, especially as the NDP, they clearly have a lot to work with in terms of this sort of funny statements by Rustad, but the more the NDP do this, the easier it is to say, like, stop it with the silliness, right? Like, stop it with the little clips. Like, you actually can completely, it becomes I'm rubber, you're glue. And then it comes right back at them. And I think, it's some of what, like, it was interesting. Like, I was watching yesterday, Rustad, I think, was talking about, the little girl with the pink bike who can't board the bus, like kind of like trying to get back to like, look, like real people's lives here, like stop the chatter. And again, I do think the Conservatives have a bit more to iron out in terms of how they handle these attacks from the NDP, because I guarantee you there's more coming. But I think they've got a viable strategy there that they can build on.
Yes, I want to talk to you today about public safety and how our sponsor, FortisBC, works to keep communities safe during wildfire season. Some of the steps they take include application of fire suppression materials and fire blankets around infrastructure, clearing vegetation, and monitoring assets to maintain service for customers in the event sections of the FortisBC energy system are damaged. The employees of FortisBC live and work in the communities that they serve, so they too understand how wildfires impact families, homes, and businesses. Many FortisBC staff involved in the 2023 West Kelowna wildfire response were personally affected, whether they were on an evacuation alert themselves or helping friends and family evacuate safely. As an energy provider, FortisBC is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to responding to wildfires. Coordinating with emergency officials, BC Wildfire Services, and other local agencies is critical to maintaining the safe and reliable energy British Columbians rely on. On behalf of our sponsor, FortisBC, thank you to all of the crews, firefighters, emergency responders, and community members who work tirelessly to keep our communities safe during a busy wildfire season. FortisBC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
And now we grab a coffee.
Not a moment too soon, I would say.
Oh my gosh. This is our reaction every time. We're like, where are the triple shot espressos? All right. This is David. This is our mini bar, but this time, because we're early in the morning, it is a decaf or a calf shot of espresso. We like to pick out the things in the campaign that are
Although
working.
I might need the hair of the dog that bit me, to be honest.
Yes, I heard one Corey Tonight is in town, and that you and Mike and he were up to some trouble last night. Yeah.
So yesterday, I'm in an Uber. I get out downtown Vancouver, and I see, to my shock and consternation, David Herle in a blazer and Corey Tonight dressed like a black lizard, like extremely clad in leather from head to toe, walking down the street. I'm trying to get out, and I'm in a damn Tesla, and you don't even know where the buttons are to get out of the door there. I'm desperately trying to get out and see the Hurley Burley guys. Curse of Politics guys. Anyways, it was good to see you in person, David. And so double shot to David Herle for being in British Columbia today and joining us for starters. And just generally, I feel like a broken record here in terms of what I've been saying in the last couple of days, though. But we're heading into a long weekend starting tomorrow. Monday is a stat holiday. And there will probably be a day off in the campaign to talk about the issues surrounding Reconciliation Day and First Nations and things like that. So, time's ticking. So it's a wake-up call to all campaigns that, come Tuesday, it's, there's not a lot of time left in this campaign. There's like 17 days left. So wakey.
So it really is an espresso. I like it. I like it a lot. Geoff?
I don't know whether it's decaf or not, but also the reconciliation theme. I've been intrigued by Chris Sankey, who's Simshan Haida man who's running for the BC Conservatives in Prince Rupert, which has historically been a safe NDP seat, Prince Rupert Haida Gwaii. But he's doing a lot of videos straight to the camera talking about how actually John Rustad is fine with UNDRIP. He's good on reconciliation. He wants to do all the right things. When Rustad's position is he's going to tear up the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. So it's an interesting combination and something I think we should keep an eye on. Maybe we can talk about that when we get back to our next one. But what Chris Sankey is saying is not what I'm hearing John Rustad say. And I think they're trying to have it both ways.
David.
Well, you know, Mike, we were talking last night about, and it to me now, it's the most interesting thing about the campaign, or one of them. Where is the federal conservative organization? Right? I mean, I said earlier that this race is a direct result of Poilievre's actions, which I believe to be true. He took on EB on drugs, and he took on EB on housing and carbon tax, and he, helped more than anything to create the dynamic that led to the collapse of BC United. But I don't see, now with the Conservatives on the verge of winning, I don't see, and we talk about their freshness as a party, their lack of discipline, their lack of sort of organizational heft. I don't see any evidence that the BC federal conservative organization is moving in to help them through this and run this campaign. Geoff, you were talking about the curiousness of the campaign that they're running in terms of yesterday, Rustat's events. So it raises the question of whether or not the federal conservatives want Rustat to win, or would rather have EB in place for the federal campaign.
He's one of their favorite targets, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the voters who support Poilievre want Rustat to win. So
Yeah, but you're touching on a nightmare I have too. Like, am I missing something? We talked about this on the show a few days ago. Is the NDP doing a brilliant job of winning the last campaign? Is there something going on here that's more than just great luck or social media wave that's supporting Rustat's success? I don't know the answer, but I think you're asking the right question.
All right. I will quickly wrap us up and say caffeinated shot for David Eby and how he showed up yesterday. I think just one point on the announcement yesterday on home ownership. The way David Eby showed up was so much more important than the announcement itself. And I think that's one of the more important things you got to do is keep showing up like that casual, cool self who's kind of likable. I was thinking like sitcom dad vibes. Keep channeling those. All right. David, thank you for joining us for episode 4 of our daily election podcast. It's like such a blast to have you on.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. And thanks for joining us, guests. We also want to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, our sponsors, Fortis BC and BC Dairy. We will see you tomorrow, guests. BC, you can never leave.
Checkout time at Hotel Pacifico. We hope you enjoyed your stay.